Hello, everyone. Tonight, I want to talk about fear. Not the primal, visceral terror of a sudden threat, or the exhilarating rush you get from a roller coaster. I'm talking about the kind of fear that seeps into your bones, that whispers to you in the quiet hours. The kind that slowly, insidiously, becomes a part of who you are. This is the kind of fear I carry from my hometown, Willow Creek. Willow Creek was, on the surface, idyllic. The kind of place where every face was familiar, where kids rode bikes without helmets until dusk, and the biggest scandal was Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning zucchini being stolen from the county fair. It was a postcard of small-town Americana. But beneath that veneer of sun-drenched charm, there was a darkness, an ancient, pervasive shadow woven into the very fabric of the woods that bordered our town. A darkness whispered about in hushed tones, reserved for campfire stories and late-night sleepovers, a secret shared between generations. A darkness known simply as the Weaver. The Weaver wasn't a monster with fangs or claws, not in the traditional sense. It wasn't a spectral apparition, nor a slasher lurking in the shadows. The legend of the Weaver was far more insidious, more psychological, and ultimately far more terrifying. It was a tale passed down through generations, about things that got lost in the whispering woods. People, memories, sanity. And the worst part? It still terrifies me, even now, years after I left Willow Creek behind, because I understand its true nature. The whispering woods. That's what we called the ancient, sprawling forest that swallowed the western edge of our town. It wasn't just a patch of trees. It felt like a living, breathing entity, a vast, silent sentinel. The trees grew impossibly tall and thick there, their branches so intertwined that the sunlight barely pierced through, leaving the forest floor in perpetual twilight, even at noon. The air was always cooler, heavier, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Even on the brightest summer day, stepping into the whispering woods felt like entering another world, colder, quieter, and somehow profoundly heavier, as if the very air was thick with unspoken secrets. As kids, we were told never to venture too deep into those woods. Our parents, usually so casual about our wanderings, grew strangely serious, their voices dropping to a low, grave tone whenever the whispering woods came up. "Don't go past Miller's Creek," they'd say, their eyes distant. Or "don't chase your ball into the old logging trail past the Petersons' property line." The warnings were vague, never explicitly mentioning the Weaver. But we knew that beyond those invisible boundaries lay something unspeakable, something that weaves. The stories varied, as urban legends often do, shifting with each telling, each generation. Some said the Weaver was an ancient spirit, angered by humanity's encroachment, seeking to reclaim what was hers. Others spoke of a forgotten tragedy, a curse laid upon the land that festered and grew. But the core of the legend remained chillingly consistent. If you went too deep into the whispering woods, the Weaver would find you. And once it found you, it would begin to unravel you, thread by thread. It would weave away your memories, your sense of direction, your very identity, your grasp on reality, until you became just another lost soul, forever entangled in its labyrinthine web. You wouldn't die. not in the way we understand it. You'd just fade, vanish, become part of the woods themselves. Your whispers carried on the wind, your essence feeding the growing darkness, a silent, living sacrifice. I remember one summer, when I was about 12, a group of us, fueled by youthful bravado and a healthy dose of fear, decided to test the legend. There was me, my best friend Liam, always the skeptic on the surface, but secretly believing every word. Maya, who was easily spooked but possessed an insatiable, morbid curiosity. And the new kid, Ethan. Ethan had just moved to Willow Creek from the city, and he scoffed at our local superstitions. "It's just a bunch of trees," he'd declared, rolling his eyes when we told him about the Weaver. "My old neighborhood had gangs more terrifying than your silly forest ghost." That was all the challenge Liam needed. Liam, who secretly believed every word of the legend, but was too proud to admit it, especially to Ethan. He suggested a dare. We'd venture deeper than any of us had dared before. We'd go past Miller's Creek, past the old Peterson's logging trail, to the abandoned Blackwood cabin. The cabin was infamous. It stood in a small clearing, deep within the woods, rumored to be the last place some of the Weaver's victims were seen. No one ever went near it. It was too far, too isolated, too potent, with a lingering dread. The day we set out, the air was thick and humid, a typical summer afternoon. But as we approached the Whispering Woods, a strange, unnatural chill descended. The sunlight, so bright and warm outside, seemed to dim instantly beneath the ancient canopy, swallowed by the oppressive shade. The usual forest sounds, chirping birds, buzzing insects, the distant murmur of the creek, were muted, replaced by a profound, unnerving quiet. It felt like the woods were holding their breath, waiting, watching our every hesitant step. We followed the overgrown logging trail, each step crunching loudly on the dry leaves, the sound amplified in the unnatural silence. Liam, despite his bravado, kept glancing over his shoulder, his jaw tight. Maya clutched her arms, shivering despite the heat, her eyes wide. Ethan, initially confident, grew quieter with every step, his urban cynicism slowly eroding. The trees pressed in on us, their ancient limbs forming a tangled maze, each shadow seeming to writhe and stretch, elongating into grotesque shapes. The air itself felt thick, almost viscous, as if we were pushing through a silent, unseen web, a resistance that was more than just humidity. Then we started hearing it, or rather, feeling it. It wasn't a sound you could pinpoint, but a low, vibrating hum that seemed to resonate in your chest, a subtle tremor in the ground beneath our feet, a deep, pervasive frequency that bypassed the ears and went straight to the bone. And the whispers. Oh, the whispers. They weren't distinct voices, no clear words, no discernible language. They were like the rustling of 1,000 dry leaves, or the soft sigh of the wind through skeletal branches. But they carried a quality of deliberate, hushed communication, a collective murmur that surrounded us, enveloped us. It felt like the woods were talking about us, sizing us up, deciding our fate, their ancient voices weaving a spell around us. Liam tried to laugh it off. "Just the wind, guys. Nothing to see here." But his voice was strained, too loud, almost a desperate plea in the oppressive silence. Maya was openly trembling, her face pale. Ethan, who had been so dismissive, looked utterly pale, his eyes darting nervously into the deeper shadows, his bravado completely gone. We finally reached the Blackwood cabin. It was a truly decrepit, leaning structure, its wooden planks rotted and covered in thick green moss, like a forgotten tomb. The windows were shattered, empty sockets staring out like blind, vacant eyes, revealing only an impenetrable darkness within. A single, rickety porch swing hung from chains, swaying ever so slightly in the breathless air, as if recently disturbed. Inside, it was pitch black, a void that seemed to absorb all light, all hope, a place where light seemed to die. Ethan, bless his city kid heart, decided to prove his bravery, or perhaps just to break the suffocating tension. "See? Nothing. Just an old shack," he mumbled, trying to sound nonchalant, but his voice wavered. He took a hesitant step onto the porch, his footfall echoing unnaturally. As his foot landed, the entire cabin groaned, a deep, mournful sound that seemed to come from the very earth itself, a lament from the wood and stone. Then the porch swing began to sway violently, creaking louder and louder, a rhythmic, deliberate motion, even though there was no breeze, no visible force pushing it. It swung with a chilling purpose, as if someone unseen, something ancient, was pushing it with slow, methodical strokes. Maya screamed, a short, sharp gasp that broke the silence like glass. Liam, for all his bluster, instinctively grabbed her arm and pulled her back, stumbling down the few rotten steps, his face a mask of pure terror. I stood frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic drum against my bones, staring at the swing. It continued to sway, faster now, its chains groaning in protest, a metallic shriek that grated on the nerves. And then, the whispers intensified. They were all around us, coming from the trees, from the ground, from the very air, a cacophony of indiscernible voices, pressing in, closer and closer, a suffocating blanket of sound. It felt like 1,000 invisible threads were being pulled around us, tightening, urging us deeper, trying to pull us into the impenetrable darkness of the cabin. A cold, clammy sensation crawled up my spine, a chilling touch that wasn't physical. My mind started to fog, a strange disorientation washing over me. For a terrifying moment, I couldn't remember why we were there, or who these people beside me were. It was as if my own memories were being tugged, stretched thin, threatening to snap, to unravel entirely. "Run!" Liam finally yelled, his voice cracking with pure terror, a sound I'd never heard from him before. He didn't wait for us. He simply turned and sprinted back the way we came, dragging Maya with him, their figures swallowed by the deepening shadows. I snapped out of my stupor, the cold clarity of fear shocking me back to reality. I looked at Ethan. He was still standing on the porch, his eyes wide, glazed over, staring blankly into the cabin's darkness. He wasn't moving. He wasn't screaming. He was just standing there, utterly transfixed, a statue of terror. "Ethan, come on," I screamed, my voice raw, desperate. He didn't respond. His mouth was slightly open, and I could have sworn I saw a faint, silvery thread, almost like a wisp of spider silk, shimmering in the air before him, seemingly emanating from the cabin's dark doorway, stretching towards his face. It was so faint, so delicate, so ethereal. I almost dismissed it as a trick of the fading light, a hallucination born of fear. But it was there, and it seemed to be pulling at him, drawing him in, thread by imperceptible thread. I knew, with a primal certainty that bypassed all logic, that if I didn't act, he would be lost to the weaver, just like the others. I ran to him, grabbed his arm, and yanked him with all my strength, a desperate, adrenaline-fueled pull. He resisted for a moment, a strange, blank look on his face, as if he were waking from a deep, unsettling dream. But my sheer panic, my desperate pull, broke whatever trance he was in. He gasped, a sharp intake of breath, his eyes focusing on me, and then the terror flooded them, but dawning horror. We turned and ran, blindly, through the dense undergrowth, ignoring the trail, branches whipping at our faces, roots tripping our feet, just desperate to get out. The woods seemed to fight us, the trees themselves conspiring against our escape. Branches whipped at our faces, leaving stinging welts, roots snaked up from the earth, tripping our feet, sending us stumbling. The whispers chased us, growing louder, more insistent, like a hungry sigh, a chorus of unseen voices urging us back. I swear, I could feel invisible hands plucking at my clothes, tugging at my hair, trying to hold us back, to entangle us. We didn't stop until we burst out of the tree line, gasping for air, sunlight blinding us after the perpetual twilight of the woods. We collapsed onto the grass, chests heaving, hearts pounding like war drums, the taste of fear metallic on our tongues. Liam and Maya were already there, huddled together, shivering uncontrollably, their faces pale and tear-streaked. They didn't ask questions. They just stared at us, their eyes wide with shared horror, a silent understanding passing between us. Ethan sat up slowly, his body trembling, his face a ghostly white. He looked around, then at me, then back at the ominous tree line of the woods, his expression utterly bewildered, a profound confusion clouding his features. What was that?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible. "What happened?" And that was the terrifying part. Ethan remembered nothing, absolutely nothing, from the moment he stepped onto the Blackwood cabin porch. He remembered approaching it, even scoffing at it, but the entire event, the swaying swing, the whispers, his trance, my desperate pull, it was all a blank, a void, as if that chunk of memory had been woven away, meticulously removed from the tapestry of his mind. We tried to tell him. Liam, still shaken, recounted what he saw, his voice trembling. Maya, tearfully, described the terror she felt, the suffocating whispers. I told him about the silvery thread, about his blank stare, about how I had to drag him away. But Ethan just listened, a frown on his face, his eyes distant, a strange detachment in his gaze. He didn't believe us. He said we must have been scared, that our imaginations got the better of us, that the fear had made us hallucinate. He even suggested that maybe I had gotten confused, that he had just slipped and I'd panicked, misinterpreting his momentary stumble. The strange thing was, while he didn't remember the details of his experience, the fear of the whispering woods had etched itself into his very being. He never scoffed at the legend again. In fact, he avoided that side of town entirely, but deep, unsettling unease flickering in his eyes whenever the woods were mentioned. He left Willow Creek a few years later, never to return. And I don't blame him. He may not remember, but the weaver left its mark. But the story doesn't end there. The experience at Blackwood Cabin haunted me, not just the memory of the fear, but the unsettling questions it raised. What was the weaver? Why did it erase memories? And what were those whispers? My skepticism, inherited from Liam, had been shattered. I started to dig. I went to the old Willow Creek Public Library, a dusty, quiet place filled with local history books and archived newspapers, the air thick with the scent of old paper and forgotten stories. I spent hours poring over old microfiches, squinting at faded print, looking for anything, any mention of strange disappearances, any pattern that defied explanation. And I found them. Not hundreds, but a handful. Small, isolated articles, decades apart, mentioning locals who had wandered into the Whispering Woods and never returned. Not just children, but adults too. A hunter in the 1920s, his rifle found leaning against a tree, but no trace of him. A young woman gathering wildflowers in the 1950s, her basket left by the creek. A hiker in the 1980s, his car abandoned at the trailhead. Each case eventually dismissed as lost or runaway, but with a curious lack of evidence, a profound absence of a body, as if they had simply ceased to exist. And then I found something truly chilling. In a collection of local folklore, compiled by a retired history teacher from Willow Creek High, a meticulous but eccentric man, I found a passage. It wasn't about the weaver, not by name, but it described an ancient belief of the indigenous people who once lived on that land. They spoke of a spirit of the deep woods, not malevolent in the way a demon is, but all-consuming, a spirit that didn't kill, but rather absorbed. It would draw in lost souls, lost thoughts, lost emotions, weaving them into the very fabric of the forest, strengthening itself with each new thread, each new essence. Their warnings spoke of the dangers of letting your mind wander too freely in those depths, of allowing fear or confusion to take root. For that was when the spirit could truly take hold. It described a process of gradual dissolution, where a person's essence became part of the land itself, their memories and identity becoming threads in a vast, living tapestry. This wasn't a monster that hunted you down with malice. This was something that lured you, something that slowly, meticulously, erased you from the inside out. The whispers weren't threatening. They were inviting, seductive, promising a release from the burdens of self. The feeling of being watched wasn't predatory. It was observational, a careful study of your vulnerabilities. The weaver wasn't looking to harm you. It was looking to absorb you, to incorporate you into its growing consciousness. And those who fell prey to it weren't dead. They were just woven. The true plot twist, for me, wasn't that the weaver was real. It was how the weaver worked, its chillingly passive yet utterly devastating method. And the even more terrifying twist? The weaver feeds on fear. It thrives on the anxiety, the dread, the unsettling questions that linger in the minds of those who hear its story. And the more the legend is told, the more people whisper about it, the more fear it generates, the stronger it becomes. Each telling, each shiver of dread, each moment of unease is a thread offered to the weaver, strengthening its grasp, expanding its reach. The legend of the weaver is not just a story we tell to scare each other. It's a mechanism, a trap. By telling this story now, by recounting my experience and sharing what I've learned, I am, in a way, feeding it. I'm giving it energy, allowing it to reach out, to find new minds to sow fear into. And that is why it still terrifies me. Not just the memory of what happened in those woods, but the realization of the deeper game being played. The fear isn't just mine. It's a thread, connected to countless others, stretching back through generations, constantly being rewoven, creating an ever-expanding web of dread. I left Willow Creek, but I couldn't leave the Weaver behind. It's with me, a constant shadow at the edge of my consciousness. Every time I get lost in thought, every time a memory flickers just beyond my grasp, every time I feel a strange sense of unreality, a cold shiver runs down my spine. Did I truly escape? Or did a small piece of me get woven into that intricate, chilling tapestry? Was my memory loss during that moment at the cabin a temporary reprieve or a subtle, permanent alteration? Sometimes, late at night, when the house is silent and the shadows stretch long, I hear the whispers, faint, almost imperceptible, carried on a breeze that isn't there, a sound that resonates only in the deepest parts of my mind. And I feel the tug, the subtle, insidious pull, trying to unravel another thread, trying to draw me back into that silent, all-consuming embrace. So the next time you hear an urban legend, especially one from a small, sleepy town, ask yourself, is it just a story? Or is it something far more profound? Something designed to keep a particular fear alive, constantly renewing its power, feeding on the very dread it inspires. The whispering woods are still there. The Blackwood cabin still stands. And somewhere, deep within that ancient, silent labyrinth, the Weaver continues its work, waiting, weaving, and always, always whispering.